Thanks, Rajat. There you go. That's the it. Yeah, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you join us in this webinar. So, just a context about the webinar. So, in today's highly competitive business landscape, success depends on how well you manage and nurture your long-tail customer accounts. These accounts, although individually small in revenue, but they also play a significant role in your overall profitability and sustainability. I will be the host of this webinar, and I am joined by Sandy Yu and Angeline Grace Gavino. So, Angeline and Sandy, why would you give our audience a time to introduce yourselves?
Absolutely. Sure. I can start. Hi, everybody. I'm Angeline. I have been working in customer success roles long before the term customer success became mainstream. So in my more than 15 years of experience, I've worked with organizations in various levels of growth, building and scaling their customer success function. Currently, I am the VP of Customer Success and Customer Support at Catalan. And this topic today is very near to my heart as well, because I have been working for the past year to build our digital customer success strategy, which includes, how we're managing our engagement with our long tail customers. So looking forward to sharing my experiences, not just in what I'm doing right now, but also with the implementation of similar strategies I've done in previous startups that I've worked with.
Hey, Vincent, really appreciate this opportunity. Hi, everybody. My name is Sandy. I'm a growth executive and startup advisor, and I help companies increase their revenue from their existing customer base. That's retention, that's customer programs, that's upsell and cross-sell. And my background is about 20 plus years in big tech. I've spent time as a leader in product, in sales, in enablement for companies, including Oracle, Cisco, WebEx, and PricewaterhouseCoopers. So I'm very interested in helping the community really understand how to deal with their customers and how to actually increase their growth and revenue for sustainable profitability with their existing customer base. So really happy to be here today.
Thanks, Angeline. Thanks, Sandy. All right. To kick off these conversations, I know a lot of organizations had different ways on how to handle tech touch or long tail of customers, but we also see how this business landscape changed. So, Angeline, I am keen to know, based on the given current global climate of customer success, what have you observed when it comes to the evolution of this role, and at the same time, what are those challenges and opportunities that have emerged?
Right. Well, there's definitely more emphasis when it comes to creating better strategies when it comes to working with your long tail customers, especially because most organizations' focus has shifted towards profitability, cost control, and then overall scalability. One challenge that I've seen emerge is that customers expect more personalization. So they want to engage with us or be engaged on their preferred cadence, frequency, preferred channels, and contexts. So I think the challenge there is typically in dealing with long tail customers, at least in my experience, has always been tech touch first. So how do you employ automation while still maintaining a certain level of personalization that your customers expect from you? And so I think that's a constant challenge that I see, but it's just generally the nature of long tail customers. It's usually more volume. And in my experience, in my current startup, they're the ones that typically actually don't want to talk to a real human. So it kind of jives with, that tech touch approach, but there's more to just tech touch. For me, dealing with long-term customers, although I did mention earlier, tech touch first is never tech touch only, but I know we're going to unpack a lot of this later on, but those are a few observations that I've seen.
Thanks, Angeline. Yeah, I think one of the key trends right now is personalization, not just in the customer success domain, but also related to sales and marketing as well. All right. So Sandy, I'd like also to get your thoughts about this because in the context of long tail customer approach, some organizations are trying to allocate fewer, some organizations are trying to allocate more. But based on your experience, how would you what's going to be your recommendation in terms of the resource allocations between proactive outreach and then reactive support to maximize the growth of your install base customers?
Yeah, that's a great question, Vincent. I think before you choose which area to focus in, you should really look at to get some data together. So look at within your company, where's the friction coming from, right? Is it from lack of awareness, lack, kind of frictions in onboarding, or is it in terms of what the velocity of support, how quickly we can do that? So depending on your specific experience, but don't just, the thing that I recommend to companies that don't just choose, right? Make sure that your decisions are in fact data backed and make sure that you're tracking the effectiveness. So if I had to choose between proactive outreach and reactive support, I would say maybe prioritize on proactive outreach. And I say this because if you did the proactive outreach and you're able to solve the problems, making sure that the customer journey, that's another big topic, ensuring that the customer journey is smooth and with the least amount of friction possible, then you wouldn't generate the support tickets in the first place. I think when I talked about data at first, support tickets is exactly where you should take a look, the data, to see the customers are giving you clues on where they're seeing the friction. And so instead of diving into solving the problem, I always recommend companies to actually take a look at what's the cause of the problem. So that's what I would recommend. If I had to prioritize one without, first I would say use data to determine which one you prioritize. But once you, if it's 50-50, unlikely, but it's 50-50, then I would say go proactive because that way you can eliminate potential of them having to come to you for support.
Thanks for that, Sandy. I appreciate that. All right, the next question going to be, I'd like you both to answer this because since both of you has a different view on how these approach has been made. So I know Oracle is a very big enterprise customers, and then Angeline can be on a corporate or mid-market type of customers. So in terms of the customer segmentations, putting up your install base, how would you prioritize the subsets of those of your install base customers, and how could you be able to give something for our audience to take a look and adapt in terms of the segmentation strategies? Sandy, if you can go first, then Angeline.
Yeah, I think of course it's paramount, right? It's not, segmentation is not just important for long tail and tech touch customers, but it's important for your overall strategy. And I think we're talking about different types of segmentation. Typically, we all know you segment by value. But I mean, more increasingly, the industry is moving towards a place where you're segmenting by use case. Now, that's much harder to do, but I think that's really important to do because then you can have cohorts of customers that are with that specific use case. And then you can actually think about how to improve the value, increase the value that your product or your services have for this particular use case, as opposed to, hey, they're, at the top 25% or the bottom 25% of our ARR. That's just how much you're spending with you. It's not how much they're able to spend. So that's what I would say about segmentation. And I would say the industry is really moving towards the direction. It's hard to segment by use case. You really have to take a look at, you have to talk to your customers, not their vertical industry, but how are they using your products? So that's what I would suggest. Start looking at it by use case.
Right. And just to add on to that, we were just talking about this prior to the start of the webinar. We could just talk about segmentation the whole 1 hour that we have. There's just so much to talk about when it comes to that. But this is a very relevant question because it's very crucial when it comes to your overall strategy, as Sandy mentioned, right? So typically, in my previous companies, we would segment. We all know the enterprise or commercial, enterprise, mid-market, SMB segment, and typically that's done based on their spend with you, how much is their ARR with the company. But here, where I'm working at a Catalan, the way we do it is we look at the company revenue to segment based on enterprise or / commercial. We lump our long tail segment as commercial, which is composed of mid-market and SMB. And basically, we look at company revenue as their growth propensity, which is exactly what Sandy was saying as well, because how much they're spending with you right now is not an indicator of how much they could spend with you. So we look at company revenue. Just makes sense for us because this gives us an overall understanding of their potential growth. Like, they're a big company, but they're spending less. So probably we need to work more on these customers. So that's one aspect of segmentation. Gosh, we have different permutations of segmentation. And now we focus on long tail, right? As I mentioned, we are looking at, for us, long tail is mid-market and SMB. We do further segment that bucket through a prioritization model that we do. So it's a scoring mechanism where we look at their ARR, their growth propensity, their churn risks. We also look at other growth factors like did they recently receive funding, total number of potential users of our platform. We usually use data enrichment tools to get those data and come up with the score. And we have P1, P2, P3, P4. And then basically, segmentation is important for us because we still, as I mentioned earlier, our long tail is not tech touch only. So we use that to understand where do we allocate an actual human resource, like a CSM that still, kind of works not the same way as how we work with our enterprise customer. We're probably medium touch. And we do that for our P1 customers. And then basically the tech touch goes through, all our segments of customers. And yes, one more point is that going back to what Sandy mentioned, product adoption metrics, how our customer uses our product, we segment by that, because then our whole strategy is defined by those different segments. We look at who has churn risk and all our related engagement to revenue protection goes to that bucket. And then we also try to have a separate bucket for potential growth, like upselling, cross-sell opportunities. And so there's so many, like I mentioned, there's so many ways that we segment outside of the usual enterprise / mid-market / SMB.
Yeah. One other thing. Oh, sorry. I just wanted one more thing. The segmentation is really important, but also it's very important to actually have different journeys based on the segmentation. So I know Angeline feels the same way. Like, you don't don't treat them the same once you've segmented them, right? So you want to make sure that, and it takes time, but you want to make sure that you develop customized journey. In the beginning, we started talking about hyper-personalization, right? So you can personalize by cohort. What is that journey for this particular use case of customer? What's the journey for the next use case of customer? Pick 4 primary use cases, right? That you should get that from very clearly from your marketing team or your leadership team. What are the problems that we're solving for our customers? This is the primary problem, secondary, tertiary, all that. And then make sure, because if you don't have different journeys for the segmentation, then you're essentially having one segment. Vincent, back to you.
Yeah. Those are, I think, segmentation that we could be able to look at. And thanks for sharing that, Sandy and Angeline. Yeah, I'd like also to add additional questions, because when we talk about lower touch customers or install base, some organizations consider this to be a lower tech revenue. And then primarily because they think that this type of install base are going to churn at a higher rate. So I've seen a lot of organizations that lower attached customer or install base churn at a higher rate, what can you, in terms of segmentation strategy, how would you be able to ensure that these type of install base will remain with organization for long? And in terms of resources allocations, how would you be able to do that, if you will?
Right. I can jump in. So it goes back to what we said. I think Sandy wraps it up very well, that segmentation is actually the key to personalization at scale, which is something that Stephanie, or no, it was Cynthia, was it, that put it on the comment section, personalization at scale, because that's really key. As I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges is our customers want more personalization, but how can you do that if you're automating and there's no human touch, or human touch usually happens after? So the way we do it is we really have a very deliberate customer journey based on the cohorts that Sandy mentioned. That's really how you're going to personalize. You cannot have the same journey across the board, because it's not going to be relevant to some of the customers. And so usually the way we do it is when you're just starting to like figure this all out, we try to look at what does a good customer look like. We try to look at historical data. We try to understand what is the ideal journey that we want our customers to go through. And we want to always nudge them into that right journey so that they achieve customer success eventually. And so we examine that. We try to understand what should they be doing at day 1, day 30, day 60, whatever, like for their whole customer journey with us. And then everything that we do is about pushing the customer to make sure that they're into that right path. And the diversions to the path are the cohorts. We identify where do our customers usually diverge from the path because of certain difficulties that they may be encountering using the journey, and design, a subset of journeys specifically for them to nudge them there. But then also there are happy customers, the happy path. So we look at 2 tracks, actually. We'll look at churn prevention and we'll look at expansion opportunities. And again, this is all based on what does good look like. So if you know what good looks like, you also know what would cause a customer to churn, and then what would cause them to upsell, buy more, or what buy another product, for example. And so that's where we kind of hone our strategies to make sure that we're addressing the personalization while making sure that it's still a revenue generating movement or strategy.
Yeah, I totally agree with Angeline that customized experience at scale is what's going to actually improve the retention. And look, we know that 44% of businesses really focus on customer acquisition, right? Everybody you talk to, how do I get new customers? But only 18% of the companies 18% of companies really focus on customer retention. And your question for us, Vincent, was how do we prevent churn? And there's long tail. I think there tends to be a lot of churn because there's not a focus on retention for that particular segment of customers. And exactly to what Angeline says is that you have to look at what are their friction points, what's been blocking for them to help them. So one thing about the customer journey, I would suggest the companies I work with, I try to get them to focus on not what a journey we want for them, but what is that journey that's going to actually help them be successful, achieve their goals. No company buy our products because they want to use our product. They buy our products for an outcome. And what is a journey that we can establish so that they can more effectively, more quickly achieve that outcome? So have that really customer outcome mindset will actually help you with prevention, because when they're getting outcome with you, they're going to want to buy more. They're going to want to stay with you longer because they're getting the outcomes that they want in the first place.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Sandy and Angeline. We need to look at the customer journey end to end. So why not do you run the pool of chess? What are those? What are the best ways to handle the long touch customers. If you guys could be able to pull up the survey, I'll get it back to Angeline and Sandy. All right, so while waiting for the result, um, I'd like first to introduce Manu. Manu, he is the founder of IPQ. Can you say hello? Hi, Manu.
Hey, hey everyone.
Are we good with chess? All right. So yeah, I'll get back to the result. But so since we talk about the customer experience at the scale, and a lot of organizations are also are also considering which customers should go for tech touch customers. So for these questions, I think I'm going to ask both of you, Angeline and Sandy, how should we determine whose customers should go into that segment of customers, and then how could we ensure that we provide the same level of service that they require from us?
That's a tough question. I'm going to let Angeline go first. Just kidding. And I think for me, long tail customer doesn't exclusively mean tech touch, right? And so there are other ways that you can do one-to-many support for your customers. So when I think customers because I think a customer in terms of use cases, right? So if they're more on if I have like 3 primary, and then the 4th segment is a cohort of customers that have kind of like edge use cases, I may not invest as much time with them, with their journeys, because they're not my ideal customer profile, right? Or they're more edge case on my ideal customer profile. So I may actually have a more of a self-serve, right? So it's tech touch or automated, however you want to do that. But you could use, your question is, how do I choose which one? For me, I would choose based on the use case. So the use case that are least aligned to the value, how I want to help, how our product wants to help our customers, that's the one that I would choose to actually have more of either automated or one-to-many, because it's not just tech touch. It's not just information on website or using chatbot to serve the answers. You can actually do cohort, right? You can do office hours. You could do, quarterly webinars, or there's a lot of different things that you can do for the customers that's not on your sweet spot of use case. But that's how I would split this. So that's how I would split it. Angeline?
Yeah, so I think, well, I like to define what tech touch first mean, at least from my perspective, or at least for the use cases of my personal experience. Typically for us, tech touch is when we employ automated engagements, either via email or in product, in platform, or other automations, other channels. It could be, I don't know, Slack channels, your website, etc. But then also on top of tech touch, like we're engaging with your customers in an automated way. You also add typically like the self-serve resources, because you want to kind of, that's why I mentioned earlier, it's typically for me, long tail segment is tech touch first. You try to push them into your self-serve resources, especially in this era of PLG, right? Where, you want to make sure that you're empowering your customers to use your product. And so that's how I would define it. Now, to your question, Vince, as to how do we define which customers fall into the segment? So our whole tech touch strategy is what we call digital customer success within our organization, which I think is something, a new buzzword that you've been hearing a lot as well. And so for us, our digital CS strategy encompasses all our segments. There are parts of the program that just really inherently touches all accounts. So everybody gets automated onboarding and automated lifecycle emails. Everybody gets specific expansion talk tracks based on our cohorts and use cases. So that's it. Now, how do we differentiate within the long tail segment? How we engage with them? There's typically less human intervention. Like enterprise CSMs would usually have very like kind of a white glove service kind of treatment where they're interacting with their customers more often. That's how we differentiate how we engage with long tail. They're tech touch first, and we identify when it makes sense for a human to intervene versus how we do it with our enterprise where it's tech touch still, but then also with very involved human intervention. Hopefully that helps. So for us, really, because of the nature of our long tail, which is they're big volume, they're usually the smaller customers for us in a set when it comes to their company revenue, as I mentioned earlier, they automatically go into our tech touch, or let's just say long tail approach where it's less human intervention. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Angeline. I think when you're thinking about what work can you automate, right? So I love how Angeline does it. You really have to look at what is happening with your customer. Be a customer for a day, be a customer for a week, right? What is their experience, and understand what are your CSMs or what are you personally doing that's repetitive. If you find yourself doing things that are repetitive, that's a great time for you to do a recording. That's a great time for you to do an office hour. So when you're trying to scale, let's say you're the only CSM in the company, right? When you're trying to scale yourself, you have to take the time to identify what are the things that you're doing repetitively, what can be done by a recording, what can be done by a document. And don't be afraid to automate these things, because a lot of your customers, especially if you're global, will rather self-service. Self-service is a real preference. So people want to, the first thing that people go to is Google, and the second is YouTube, right? Are your answers in YouTube? Because you're not always going to be around. And so you have to have the perspective that self-service is a preference for some of your customers. And who are those customers that have that preference? So look at, again, so my tips are, look at what you do repetitively, what your CSMs do repetitively. That's a great opportunity for that to scale, to do something that's more repeatable. So it's not you doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sandy, Angeline. I also have a follow-up questions because back in the days when I handled about book of business about 500 to 600, one of the challenges that I have when it comes to engagement at scale is you really have to make sure that just like what you have, Sandy, you have to make sure that there are documents where you could be able to share with the customers. You have to ensure that KB articles available. But when it comes to the skill set of the one who should be handling long tail or tech touch accounts, would you prefer a hybrid type of customer success managers, or would you prefer someone who is in a marketing background that could be able to help facilitate this kind of engagement? Just kind of thinking about your thought process on there.
All right. Very good question, because I've had to think about that when I was starting, the team that's meant to handle a digital CS strategy. By nature, I needed someone who still has the customer success mindset, who wears that CS hat. And we do know that in the industry, there's, a differentiation now with, enterprise CSM, SMB CSM. So I needed somebody who has the capability to engage at scale and to handle big books of business. However, it starts to become very important for this person or this team to have a component of marketing, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of self-service publication resources that you really have to do. You have to have documentation, and not even just marketing. And marketing is just one tip of it, because one part of your tech touch approach is, email engagements, right? So naturally, you need someone who's adept at, what's the right subject line, what's the right CTA, all of these marketing related metrics. But then somebody who's also able to do or churn out training videos, or documentation of your product. And I realized that it's very difficult to find like one person to have all of these, capabilities and experiences. So the way that I had to do it was, I work with a strategy for our LongTail, or our tech touch strategy, with an SMB CSM, somebody who really knows how to handle and work with LongTail customers, or large book of businesses. But then I tapped into our marketing team, I tap into our product team, I tap into existing teams to kind of create this small task force to help us get started with our digital CS strategy. So even until right now, 1 year later, I don't have a dedicated customer marketing, although that's part of our digital CS strategy, is being handled by somebody from the marketing team who has a dotted line to me, but really belongs into the marketing team. So what I'm saying is, short answer to your question is, you need a very diverse skill set that's very different from your traditional enterprise CSM. But it's very hard to find this person, probably a unicorn. So if you don't have that one person, you may try to tap into existing teams to help you. At least that's my experience. I don't know how Sandy has done it before.
Yeah, in our experience, that cross-functional support with each other is really important. And just in terms of the resource, that person that Angeline described, that knows email automation, that knows document creation, that knows customer success, that person doesn't exist, right? And even if that person does exist, you as a leader need to let them know what to focus on. Because if you're going to say that I'm going to hire you, you're going to do the job of 3 people, then they're going to need help prioritize, right? Otherwise they won't be successful, and then they'll be burnt out, and that's not good for anybody. So I would say, in terms of finding the right resource, 100% leverage other teams. But what's important, that Angeline mentioned a really important aspect, is developing that task force. Having a task force so the cross-functional teams understand their responsibilities to support the customer journey and help them. So I think a lot of times there's disconnect, and people feel like either they're doing other people's jobs or other people are doing their jobs, right? So that cross-functional alignment is really key, but you have to bring them together, not just doling out responsibilities, but also sharing the results. And that's so you got to close the circle, right? So after you've said we're going to do this campaign, we got to know what happened to the campaign. And we didn't have a chance to talk about this yet, but accountability and measurement. Before you do anything, you got to make sure you understand the outcome that you want. So for us, we had this cross-functional, it's not the task group, but it's a cross-functional summit. So we hold that on a quarterly basis. Then we talk about responsibility, we talk about accountability, we talk about targets. And so everyone is aligned on what the outcome is. So they know, if you're in marketing and you're trying to do the email for everyone, okay, this is the outcome, this is the audience. So everyone's aligned to the same audience and the same outcome. So not really what you were asking, your question, Vincent, was about how do you find the right person. I think the right person is probably a person that you have, and you find out what their strengths are and let them do that, because they're going to be really good at it. And maybe they're not strong in doing email automation. Maybe they're not strong in developing training courses. Like, who else in the companies? When you're a startup, everyone has to wear multiple hats, right? So find out who's really strong in the area. That's what we did. that could actually do the work to support that particular CSM, so that CSM could be the best CSM it can be.
Yeah, that's the best use case, Sandy. I appreciate that. 100%. If you would like to have a team that would be able to support your long tail customers, you want to make sure that you hire the right persons, and that person also passionate to helping the customers. Yeah. Thanks for that. All right. So since we're talking about a one-to-one engagement model, one thing that also comes into mind is how is technology is driving success in order for us to ensure that one is we are providing the right service to the customers, and at the same time, what's the revenue of putting good tech stack for that? So based on your experience, Sandy and Angeline, in terms of emerging technologies or trends, what are those trends or technologies you think could help these segment of customers?
Well, I think most companies, I think the latest tech stack for most SaaS companies is like, I don't know, like 200. So there's not a shortage of tools out there. I think it's important for CTOs, if or the leader of a startup, to really look at what is really necessary. What are the ones that you have to have? There are applications like AppEQ that allows your CSMs, allows your support teams to let you stay in the platform that you enjoy and still have visibilities to other systems. Let's say you're a CSM and you have to live in your email, or you have to live in Slack. You can actually see what's happening with your customers in Zendesk and have prioritization. So those are the type of tools that I would prioritize for tools that have a lot of integration that could bring different data sets in, as opposed to a single use applications. Angeline, what about you?
Yeah, that's true. And for us, there's like you said, there's no shortage of tools, and really, I don't think there is a best practice of what are the tools that you have to have, because each organization is different goals, different customers, and all of that. So for us, for example, we don't have a customer success platform, but we do have a CRM where all our customers' data lives. That's our single source of truth. And we do have, particularly for our engagement, our tech touch engagement, we mentioned email automation. We use whatever marketing is using. So software that they're using for automating emails, outreach, that's super important for us. We also need a platform that allows us to engage within our application. So that's another super crucial tool for us. And then where we just host all our self-service resources, we have our documentation, we have online training videos, we call it Academy. It could be very simple, it could be on your website, So I think for us, especially because we're a startup, we try to be very deliberate with our investments on tech stack, especially if we are going to your question, Vince, especially if it's directed to the long tail segment, just because of the nature of the accounts there. But like I mentioned also earlier, our tech touch approach covers all our customer segments. So it's never been an issue for us to maybe get approval for purchasing certain tech stack. However, like I mentioned, we're very critical and deliberate with what tech stack we choose, and we try to really prioritize those three that I mentioned. And we would recycle whatever, or we would hop into whatever another team is already using, so that we don't have to have different tools that's basically doing the same thing across different teams. So circling back to what Sandy mentioned, right? We want to be able to integrate with different tools so that there's no, there's no silos when it comes to the data that you have, because data is one thing that's also super important when it comes to your tech touch strategy, basically. But there's one thing I wanted to add, because I'm increasingly seeing this. One technology that I think could make a difference would be AI related or machine learning related technologies. And not just because it's it's the mainstream, it's what everybody's talking about. But I realized that when we're segmenting our customers, when we were talking about looking at the customer journey, and then looking at your customers' different use cases and looking at what good looks like, a lot of that is based on assumption. And we would have to crawl through historical data to really identify that. I do think that AI and machine learning can help us just get those analytics and understand what good looks like for us and identify what I mentioned earlier, churn risk metrics or churn risk signals and expansion signals, and help us automate that whole journey. So one key thing that we haven't also discussed yet, but we're kind of alluding to when it comes to personalization, segmentation, data is super important. So I do think that having AI will help us with processing of those data. But yeah.
That's another topic for you, Vincent, for us to
Yeah.
have a conversation about how to incorporate AI. I don't know, maybe by a raise of hands, who's thinking about how to leverage AI there you go. Everyone's raising their hands, 2 hands, leveraging AI. Yeah, that's definitely a definitely big topic that we can help, because there's a lot of tools out there and all of them are free. And so I would say, in terms of tools and the tech stack, go as long as you can without purchasing a tool. Right? So resources are so tight. Instead of spending your time trying to get a budget, instead of spending your time, use that time to set up a system, Google Sheets, Slack channels, and then use that to generate the data. Angeline mentioned having the data, right? Use that to generate the data you need to make it easy for you to ask for that CSP, and make it easy for you to ask for, real-time notification systems or that chatbot. Whatever you think that you need, do it without. Make sure to capture the data that you have so you have a really robust set. And if you can, do A/B testing, right? And a long-tail customer is a great place to experiment. You can have, hey, this cohort of customers has this journey. Again, we're going back to the journeys, has this journey, and then this cohort. The ones that have access to documents, self-service documentations, the ones that have recorded onboarding, like what is their experience? So what do you really need? But my suggestion is that it's really hard to get budget to buy new stuff. I don't know, it is for me. So I want you to try to do as much as you can without it, but make sure to document the process so you know what you did. And when you do have the budget to purchase, you know exactly what you need and what you don't need.
Very well advised, Cindy. I appreciate that. All right. So when we also talk about this kind of install base or customers, we also wanted to make sure that we monetize or see revenue out of this engagement or long touch customers. I'm also keen to know how would you ensure that with this kind of engagement that we have with this kind of customers, how could we be able to still get more revenue out of these customers in terms of upsell or cross-sell opportunities? Any tips and suggestions for that, Angeline and Sandy?
Yeah, so very good question. In my organization, the customer success team owns the revenue part. We own renewals, we own expansions as well. And so it's just natural for me that as I'm working on our digital CS strategy or tech touch strategy, that, I always put that revenue hat too. And so I keep mentioning earlier, right? What does good look like? We identify what are signals for us that indicates that a customer could be primed for an upsell or a cross-sell. And that could differ from product to product. But for us, we look at, integrations do they have? We look at basically we look at how they're using our product today. How near are they to their number of licenses that they've used up, how deep they are using our product. There are certain features in our platform that for us, if they're using it extensively, signals potential cross-sell or upsell. So we try to look at that. I think you start with examining those. And then we automate that. Once we go back to segmentation, right? Based on data, we cohort customers based on their usage or product usage behavior. And we know that this behavior means we can sell them this, or we can cross-sell them this. This behavior means, they probably want to buy more licenses. So we engineer our whole expansion track based on those data. And we are still able to keep tabs on our customers' potential expansion opportunity at scale using that. So it doesn't, because I know that even enterprise CSMs, right, like high touch CSMs, they still also look at data. They still try to understand there are signals for them that, indicates potential expansion opportunities. You just try to figure that out based on what can we really see based on their product usage that tells us that. And our approach there is also very different. We don't want to be very salesy when we engage with them. When we know that when they fall into that cohort, we try to do, our approach is always educational rather than, hey, it's time to upsell, it's time to buy this product. So it's also very important the context in which you're reaching out, because then it becomes more relevant and it becomes more personalized. Again, going back to personalization, how it is important for that segment. So we always try to educate them about the value proposition. Let's say if we identify they're ready to buy this product, we kind of feed them with information about this product, this feature, success stories of customers who've purchased that. And that's kind of how we identify or how we craft our messaging. So, I mean, short answer is there's two ways that we do about it. We cohort them based on product usage data, based on what we identify as expansion signals. And then the second part of that is making sure that we still have a personalized approach and a very human approach to it by educating them first rather than, selling them. Just like how we want our customer success team to handle it. We want to guide customers to be successful so that expansion is just a byproduct of that. You don't have to push to sell something. That's how different it is, right? Post sales. And so we employ that same thinking that if they understand the pros and the value of the product, then they would come to the conclusion themselves, oh, I think it's time to buy. But because we put that messaging in front of them when it makes sense, because they reach that cohort and the right timing, then the expansion opportunity is more likely to happen based on our experience.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Angeline. Got to be friends with your product teams and be friends with your marketing teams, because they are tracking. And we didn't really talk about this, but it's really important to have an operations person that is actually looking at the data, right? So how are you going to get the in-product data? How are you going to get the response data or engagement data from the marketing side? I know there's a question from the audience. Vincent, did you say there was a question from the audience?
Yeah, that's gonna be the next question I'm going to ask. But let me share it over to you, Sandy and Angeline, then because I'm also conscious about the time. So the questions from the audience is if we are going to measure the success based on this kind of long tail customers, what's going to be the metrics that you guys are going to implement, and how are you going to measure that kind of metrics within the customer journey, if I get the questions right?
Yeah, if I understand correctly, for me, I wouldn't measure them differently. I would measure about adoption. So I would measure about adoption of the different capabilities that you have in your product, if that's available. I would measure also really how often that they're submitting tickets, right? But that's just part of looking at the journey. So we look at what's adoption in the product, right? That also tells you potential signal for upsell, just like Angeline mentioned, but also how challenging is it for them to be a customer of ours, because they have a lot of automation, right? So that's the group that has a lot of automation, less human touch. How often are they renewing? Are they renewing at the same rate as my high touch customers? And again, for me, this would be a outlier use cases. Are they adopting the main use cases? So that I would also measure, are they adopting the main use cases of our of the problems that we solve for our customers? So I think you want some hard numbers to help you identify whether or not it's working. Of course, the king of all the metrics is retention. Are we retaining these customers? Are we growing these customers? Are we reducing the support tickets for these customers? So those are like the top three that will give me a signal whether or not we're doing right by this segment of customers. Angeline?
To add to that, so for us, I don't differentiate our metrics between our high touch and our long tail. So our North Star is NRR for us, and secondary is net revenue retention and gross revenue retention. So because as I mentioned, our CSMs handle the expansion part of the journey as well. So that's our North Star, but that is a lagging metric, right? And so how do we make sure that we're on track to achieve that? Because that usually only happens at, like renewal once every year for every customer, right? If you have an annual subscription. And so we also look at leading metrics, and one of which is product adoption. And again, it will differ from product to product. You need to look at what are the metrics for you that signals good usage or what a good customer looks like. And we also do measure engagement because we want to see how customers are receiving our automated engagements, either email. So we look at email opens, click-throughs. We continuously also reiterate that, like, play around with subject lines and CTAs to understand how we can improve. We look at material downloads or visits to certain parts of our website where we have our self-serve materials. So that's how we measure engagement. But adding just to what Sandy said, we have our North Star, and then we do look at our leading metrics as well. One thing that I would also like to add is customer sentiment. We do survey our long tail every once in a while. We're very deliberate with our surveys as well. So that helps us measure. And how do we know that it's effective? We measured our baseline, where we were across all those metrics that we're looking at. Instead of ensuring that they're the same as our enterprise, we try to look at it by itself. We look at our long tail segments, our baseline, and we try to improve it over time. That was kind of how we approach that. And so long as we're seeing continuous increase, then for us, it's successful.
Very well said, Angeline. Thank you. So again, I think we are right on the time. So thanks everyone for joining. So we are also going to have our next webinar on September 12th. And then the topic is going to be how does customer success leaders do differently? So I invite all to join us again. So again, Angeline, Sandy, thank you so much for your time, and also for the audience. Manu, any last word, Manu, before we close the webinar?
Just want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you for the questions. And it was a really great conversation with you, Angeline. Thank you.
Yeah,
I've learned a lot.
Really great, insights for me, and I definitely appreciate everyone for sharing and the knowledge.
All right. Again, everyone, thank you again for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great one.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.